Believe it or not, Beidou is one of the most technical characters to master in Genshin Impact to date. Even though she is just a standard 4-star that anybody can get their hands on, it doesn't take away from the fact that there is one thing about Beidou that differs from any other character in this game, and that's her counter. You see, unlike a lot of things in this game, Beidou's counter doesn't rely on how much crit rate you've put on her. It's all about timing, and the time window between landing a crit with her counter or not is ridiculously small. Players who have mastered this know that Beidou is a great backup to have in their arsenal of characters. If you're looking for a quick way to sneak in a quick little crit in battle, Beidou is pretty much the character you're looking for. You can swap her in, crit with her counter, swap her out, and get back to what you were doing. As such, this makes her both good sub DPS and main DPS potential. So how do you time her counter? Why is it so difficult? How can you master it? That's what we're going to cover today. This is the art of Beidou's counter. So why is it so difficult to work Beidou's counter in the first place? Well, for that, we're going to need to take a look into her passive. Retribution. Counter-attacking with Tidecaller at the precise moment when a character is hit grants the maximum damage bonus. Let's break this down, and by breaking it down, I'm mainly looking at the phrase, the precise moment when a character, aka Beidou, is hit. This means that after you've ascended her past level 20, she will essentially crit every time you time her counter perfectly. You can't press it too early, and you can't press it too late. You have to hit it at the exact moment when she gets hit by an enemy in order to crit. And the way to become consistent with this is just practice. Beidou's counter is difficult to explain. However, what really helped me was to visualize what exactly happens from Beidou's point of view, I guess, if that makes any sense. So I've got this clip here, and I'll try to explain my thought process of how I'm timing this. Let's look at it first, just on its own, like that. Let's slowly break it down. So the Hilichurl, obviously getting ready to hit me. It's about to jump. It's about I've kind of already sort of pressed the button, I guess, so I've timed it in a way whereby she does her counter the moment I get hit. And then bam. It's difficult to explain. But I don't know. Maybe that helps you visualize it. I don't know. And now back to our regularly scheduled program. I always like to warm up with Beidou by bullying the Hilichurls at Starfell Lake. I would recommend practicing on easier enemies like Hilichurls too when you're first starting to understand how her counter works. Because you're going to mess up a lot, especially if your goal is to become somewhat consistent with it. Once you can crit on Hilichurls on a semi-consistent basis, it means that you've understood the technique of her counter. It's in your muscle memory at that point. And that's when you can start using her for real. And that's when things start to get interesting. Because you'll have to relearn how to use her counter all over again. You see, different enemies have different ways of attacking you. As a Beidou main, I can say that you almost have to memorize the attack patterns of enemies if you want to crit on everything you see. However, it will never take too long to get the hang of this once you've got the foundations of her counter in the first place. Because like I said before, it's in your muscle memory at that point. All you're having to do is make some slight adjustments to your timing in accordance to the enemy that you're fighting. So thanks Hilichurls over at Starfell Lake. You really did help us out there in the beginning. While you don't need Constellations to make Beidou into a beast, I have her at C6. So as a C6 Beidou haver, I'd like to talk about the differences that her Constellations can make before going on to talking about the other ways that you can master her counter. Before getting her to C3, I was hitting around 35k with her counter. Once I got up to C3, that number went up to around 43k, and at C6, You can get as high as 50k without having to use any food, team resonance, or Bennett's. This is because of the way you can combine her ults and her counter at C6. Beidou's C6 effect is during the duration of Stormbreaker, the electro res of surrounding opponents is decreased by 15%. Since her counter deals electro damage, the lack of electro resistant enemies will have during that time of her ult really helps. Her counter in conjunction with her ult at C6 turns her into a real monster. All I've spoken about thus far is timing Beidou's counter perfectly. However, this is the most time-consuming way to crit with her, because it requires a lot of practice to get it down. While it's the most solid and secure way to crit with her, the downside is that you need to give this mechanic a lot of time in order to get decent at it. Luckily, there is more than one way to use her counter, so let's talk about those too. A way to use Beidou's counter is to hold it while getting hit twice by enemies. As the description says, damage dealt scales with the number of times Beidou is attacked during the skill's duration. The greatest damage bonus will be attained once this effect is triggered twice. Critting with Beidou's counter can also depend on where you're standing. The weather, believe it or not, actually triggers whether or not she crits. For example, and probably the easiest way to do this, is to set the grass on fire with somebody like Klee, or Bennett, or Hu Tao, or whoever pyro you got. Set the grass on fire, get Beidou in there, hold the skill for a little while, and then she'll crit. The same thing applies for if she's standing in water that is electrified, or if she gets struck by lightning. This is because these also count as hits. These weather effects are treated as if an enemy has hit her, a bit like what we were talking about earlier. That being said, this will not work in Abyss if you're looking to use her in Abyss. This is primarily for if you're using her in the open world, which is another reason why I would recommend learning how to perfectly counter with Beidou's counter.